The Geonosis arc was incredibly complex. It's rare that we ever spend 4 episodes on one thing.
I like that each story within the arc is quite different too. It's not just here's another giant battle. It sort of shifts and it twists and it turns and it tells different types of stories, but they all interlock together pretty well. We didn't really sort of break Geonosis down episode by episode so much as environment by environment. You know, we knew that we would have to figure out the interior of the weapons factory, the catacombs, the temple, and it all had to sort of relate to each other because it's all Geonosis. So we just sort of designed Geonosis.
We all ready, Rex?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to give the idea that the whole planet was under siege at one time. Beginning of Landing Point Rain, you see them looking at holograms, all these little triangles representing attack vectors, and the concept of taking back this planet to me needed to feel big for a change.
Landing at Point Rain is a huge, huge episode. It just sort of snowballed. It got bigger and bigger just in terms of how much happens and how much is happening on screen at the same time.
We really needed to add layers on. Some of the earlier season 2 episodes, explosions didn't have this impact. You watch any type of intense battle movie, and you always know that the explosions are supposed to shake your bones. You can see this kind of this beat. And I thought, well, let's add that same punch into all these explosions. Then there's a second bit of the explosions. You've got your beat before the explosion, but then there's what I like to call the shark bits. 2 of the key elements are these black shards you see shooting up. So no longer are we doing just explosions that look like flashes of light with black smoke. You combine it with an element like these black shards that just spike out when the explosion happens, and then let the debris kind of fall and rain down. So in between the explosions, when there isn't anything going on, you at least have stuff falling down. It gives the sound guys all the stuff to work with, and it just really makes it intense.
The Jedi are vulnerable. I think people lose sight of that in this superhero age. They have very human emotions. They're well trained, but Obi-Wan's already injured. Things have fallen apart around him.
Are you injured, General?
No, nothing too serious.
Having Ki-Adi-Mundi with a limp, having him injured, and yet pushing on tells you infinitely more about his character than if he was to destroy hundreds of battle droids on his own. Ki-Adi-Mundi is a really interesting Jedi. He's one of the only Jedi on the Council that actually has a speaking part aside of Mace Windu and Yoda.
Impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
He talks, and when he talks, he might deliver lines with closed lids. The line that I always use from the features to get into character was like, "Your thoughts dwell on your mother." You know, it's like this really drawn-out speech.
We took a slight detour that put us out of communications for a bit.
He's very instantly recognizable as that character, but if you were to put an image of the CG Ki-Adi-Mundi beside the live action one, you would see just how much has been stripped away. We actually redesigned Ki-Adi-Mundi to just keep him a little more simple. It may not seem like a big deal, but these are the things that take it out of the look of the show and a little too close to photo reality, whereas this is definitely, you know, the cartoon version of Ki-Adi-Mundi. Things like the eyebrows are simpler. The overall shape of the head has less geometry to it.
We must push on! Forward!
You know, we're going through the tunnel with the Geonosians, and George is like, yeah, well, here we'll have the, you know, the tunnel and the flamethrowers. And, yeah, how about that? Look, bring in the flamethrowers. Have Ki-Adi-Mundi say, bring in the flamethrowers. And it's like, flamethrowers?
Bring in the flamethrowers!
I illustrated for Joel how I would draw the fire. And I wanted the bottom edge of the fire to be very straight and flat, but I wanted the top to have this broken edge that kind of rippled.
You can see the geometry that's going to be used in the actual flamethrower here. What you're seeing is just the particles just emitted in a straight line. When you watch it in the shot, it's very similar. Put a little bit of heat ripple on it, a little bit of glow. And it was just a real straightforward, simple way to keep the effect looking graphic and at the same time being dynamic.
Another sort of legacy sound effect that we had to expand upon a little bit on this arc was the sound of the Geonosians. One of the elements was the mating calls of penguins, Antarctic penguins, that I found in Melbourne at this island called Phillip Island. And I went down there, and they were calling back and forth to each other. So that's one of the elements of the Geonosians. It's and then mixed in with that as well, some of the speaking kind of babble of the Geonosian is a couple of fruit bats. I'd given a banana to one of them, and then another one came to try to get it at the same time, so they're kind of fighting over that, and that's this sound. So that's just a bunch of snarls, and they're just kind of pitched and layered on a keyboard and performed in a way to make it sound like it's more vocal. So those two items make up a lot of the Geonosian chatter.
Well, take care of yourselves. I expect to see both of you back here by the time I've destroyed the main factory.
At the end of Landing at Point Rain, Obi-Wan and Kiadi are injured, and they go in a gunship, and they're gone. And now we have the second wave, which is taking down this weapons factory.
Weapons Factory was an opportunity to do something I'd wanted to do, which was contrast one Padawan versus another. One Padawan I liked was Barriss Offee. We had a good opportunity to have another girl, a little bit older than Ahsoka, but still a Padawan, and show those two try to work together to succeed in a mission.
Well, Barriss, aren't you going to introduce yourself?
Padawan learner, Barriss Offee, at your service.
Barriss was a tough design because the real costume is very, very simple. So this is the movie costume, and the only thing that's really distinctive is the texture in the cloak and this belt buckle. So we kept the belt buckle very, very close to her live action appearance. But what is new here is this wrist guard, because Barriss needed to be able to use a communicator. And then the other big change for Barriss is her cape. It was important to keep the hood because the hood's a big part of her look, but once it sort of gets off the shoulders and starts to drape, it seemed like we could get away with maybe trimming Barriss Offee's cape.
I wanted a scene on Geonosis where they sneak through this tunnel and all the bugs are sleeping.
We have to find another way.
You need that little tension. And you can make a little fun moment in it too when the bug falls and puts his hand on Barriss's head.
We built two different styles of Geonosians. One is slightly bigger and is wearing spikes on his shoulder and has wings, and he's the sort of warrior. And then there's a smaller version which we call the drone. And then we just colored both of them green and brown, so you have 4 versions of Geonosians.
The biggest thing that I conveyed to the animators that were working on the Geonosians is, they're obviously very insectoid. They're bug-like creatures. Each one of their joints is segmented, and so it's a quick little bug-like movement wherever possible. And maybe like just polishing it off with just a little bit of a flap in the wing, especially within Poggle. Poggle's beard is just a great way of just selling his look, and anytime he's talking, and as an animator, you want to look for ways to add in things that the sound designer might pick up on.
The first time we see Poggle the Lesser in the Star Wars universe is in Attack of the Clones. Basically, Poggle the Lesser is a few different things. He's got some mouth clicks. There's like a flutter sound. I ended up just doing that kind of flutter sound through a comb and wax paper. It gives it an extra buzz to it. And then he also has this weird kind of almost backward speak that goes with that. So I ended up giving the picture department at the end of the day, they've got a nice 3.5 minute long chunk of just Poggle emoting different ways.
editing is everything in Star Wars. Jason Tucker is my right hand when it comes to that. He and I have been at the George Lucas School of Star Wars Filmmaking now for 4 years, so I'd like to think we've learned a couple things.
At the very first initial cut that we had, Anakin and Luminara were putting the bombs on top of the super tanks. And when George came in, he wanted to flip the shots entirely. So basically all the shots of the bridge were upside down to show that Anakin and Luminara are coming underneath the bridge, and we were going to destroy the bridge altogether. It's an amazing process watching George work, as we were cobbling all this together in the editing room.
The end of Weapons Factory features one of the hugest explosions that have been attempted on the show. It's even got its own sort of blast wave and shock wave and wall of dust.
Matt and Dave did this thing with the sound where they really cut all of the sound effects out.
We took the effects and EQ'd them down to just the low end, so you just hear the little of the hits of the explosions, and the music really carries that, because it's really not about the Weapons Factory collapsing at that point. It's really about Ahsoka and Barriss are probably dead.
Have to get the sense that they died. And nothing sold that as well as the sound.
At the end of the episode, these two girls who are put in this dire situation actually bond. They're literally placed as close together and they can't do anything. They're trapped.
Ahsoka, can you hear me? Come in.
The tank lifters are here to move the debris as ordered, General.
Get to it, Rex.
Legacy of Terror continues our trend this season of doing these kind of homages to different film genre, and in this case, it is a zombie movie.
They were fun. I mean, I could have just sat there all day doing giant zombie bugs.
That is one ugly bug.
In Legacy of Terror, we get to meet the Queen Geonosian. And we were kind of concerned about what we were going to do there, and we were going to have to put more fruit bat penguin thing in there, what we were going to do. But then we got this performance back from D. Baker.
He speaks like that kind of voice, and I don't know how much that they've affected it or how much it actually sounds like that.
You are the creatures that attack Geonosis.
He came up with this voice that's just, I think, absolutely terrifying.
Dee's performance of the zombie queen was definitely something that helped inform the animation of it. That inhaling breath, the creepiness of her, and then that build up and shake and growth into the frustration in her quicker gestural movements.
So we were doing this movie with zombies and a queen and down under the ground, and what I wanted to do with the Sandstorm was introduce this threat element.
It gives this episode a really unique flavor, for sure. It sets it apart from the other two Geonosis episodes at this point. It's perfect because it holds the Jedi down for a little while, enough to where Luminara can get captured.
The Sandstorm was interesting because that was actually using a lot of Mustafar smoke elements, but just colored to the dust color, using painted textures, and then render versions of it to use in a comp.
It looks great. I mean, the Sandstorm is one of my favorite parts of that whole episode.
This is our way out!
As we move from Legacy of Terror into Bright Invaders, it's a little more than just bringing the zombies up into space. It's also bringing the Padawans back.
I suggest we let our Padawans handle the supply mission.
Whatever needs to be done, Master. I'm happy to help. As am I.
So we introduced the concept of these worms, these parasites, in the previous episode, and then we follow through with showing their effect on clones and how they occupy bodies and the real horror of it and the Brain Invaders.
What's nice about it is that you don't know who's infected or who the bad guy is, so it sort of ratchets up the tension in a different way.
Varys? What's wrong? Varys, no! This is Ahsoka. Come in.
Ahsoka, listen to me. The worms are affected by the cold.
Cold?
When Ahsoka figures out that they need to turn on the air conditioner as cold as possible, which we really wanted to read as cold, which is something we hadn't done before. Danny supervised the animation so that the characters kind of shook just a little bit. We also recall back to a season 1 episode, Trespass, where we had breath. So we have a bunch of cycled breath elements, and that was probably the biggest seller of cold.
Kill me. Please. I can't.
It's all right, Ahsoka. It's okay. You're safe.
So in the end, the Geonosis arc, what it really did in the bigger picture of the Clone Wars is it forced us to work on a scale that we had never worked on before. We did different types of episodes that range from massive action to almost horror-type episodes. We were dealing with new Jedi Knight Katie Monday. We were dealing with better effects in the flamethrowers. We introduced the character of Poggle. We were dealing with more in-depth story arcs overall. So all in all, Geonosis represents a landmark for us in the Clone Wars, but it's just really now a shadow of the things that were to come.